Welcome back. How you feel about the Russia investigation largely depends upon whether you like the president or not. We get that. And there's a whole lot to talk about in terms of what happened this week, including hopes of tax reform, and we will get to that. But today, President Trump's former national security advisor pled guilty to lying to the FBI, and it's no small thing. Why? What's significant isn't that Michael Flynn pled guilty to a single felony charge. It's that Flynn escaped what could have been a boatload of charges connected to his overseas business dealings in exchange for cooperating with the special counsel. What could that cooperation be? ABC News is reporting Michael Flynn is willing to testify during the presidential campaign. Candidate Donald Trump directed him to contact and talk to the Russians, and that he is willing to testify against the president and members of the president's family. And joining us for more is Rod Thompson, the president of the Sarasota Republican Club, and Kevin Griffith, the vice chairman of the Sarasota Democratic Party. You people know, Kevin, that you are a defense attorney here in Sarasota. So let me start by asking you, a lot of people have said to me today, you know, one single charge of lying to the FBI, that's not good, but it's not a lot, considering what we have heard over the last few months about all the things that the feds could be bringing against Michael Flynn. So what does this say to you?
Well, it's important for people to know that when you have a plea bargain, you have different sides. You have the DOJ, the Department of Justice, they're the prosecutors. You have the defendant and the defense attorney, and you have the judge. A plea bargain means that there's been an agreement between the prosecutor and the defendant about something going on that case. In this instance, and it's important to remember, the judge is not part of that plea bargain. And in the state of Florida, the judge is not required to accept that plea bargain. And so, again, I haven't read the terms of the Flynn case here, but what it's likely to mean is that that he's agreed with the Department of Justice to do something, his statements and his testimony, in exchange for them saying to the judge, give him a more lenient sentence. But
it doesn't mean necessarily that through all the year-plus investigation, all they got Flynn on is a single count of 4 instances of lying to the FBI.
Well, again, they have to do the analysis of whether not only is there evidence, but can they prove the case beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. So there may have been some evidence on some of those other topics, but they may have felt, well, if we can get him and prove this case on that lying to the FBI, we can use him to pursue other people in the administration.
I know you haven't had the chance to read the pleadings in the case, but there were stipulations that Flynn will now cooperate with the special counsel's office, including testifying against his former colleagues at the White House and in the campaign. Considering who Michael Flynn is and what he may or may not know, how significant is this?
Well, it's very significant, because what it's likely to say is that there are other people within the White House and the administration who have committed some sort of crime.
Rod, we're going to show you something from the convention, which is really kind of come back and appears ironic. Let's take a look.
Yeah, that's right. Lock her up. If I did a tenth of what she did, I would be in jail today.
So today, just over a year after that took place, it is Michael Flynn who is facing a felony count and is in significant legal trouble. You know, how do area Republicans look at this? Because we've been talking about what is this all about for a long time now. You can't say that, you know, he was a minor player in the campaign or a minor player in the White House. So what are folks like yourself thinking?
A couple thoughts. Number one is that I've said on your show actually a number of times that I thought that Manafort and Flynn were both in trouble. Manafort, I thought, was kind of dirty all along. As soon as Trump figured that out, he fired him, didn't vet him adequately. Flynn, a little bit more complicated character as a general and decorated and all, but very worrisome because of some of the things that sounds like he did and not registering as an agent to Turkey and these sorts of things. This became sort of worrisome about what sort of leverage you could have on him. So far, the two that I thought all along were in trouble seem to be in trouble. I am not sure that, although it's said with great gravity and seriousness, that that Trump asked him to reach out to Russians, that there's anything wrong with that. Nothing illegal, certainly, with their reaching out. I don't think there's anything wrong, because my understanding is that campaigns, the two major campaigns, reach out to foreign countries all the time while they're forming their policies and their planks, figuring out what they can promise to do and not promise to do. Of course, they would want their own trusted emissaries reaching out to major other countries to find out where things stand, how they might be able to work with them once in office. There's nothing illegal about that. The problem would be is the content of those conversations. If there was like a promised quid pro quo, all right, the Russians will do their bots and whatnot and try and help Trump win in return for something, that, of course, could be a problem. But just reaching out clearly is not.
But here's the question. Would the special counsel plea bargain this case and offer a plea or a deal to General Flynn if not for the fact that when you are in a situation like that, you have to proffer to the prosecutor what you are willing to testify to? So the special counsel would be aware of the information that General Flynn has.
Presumably, they would be aware of the topic of the information. I mean, I am not a lawyer. I have never been involved with this sort of thing on the inside of it at all. I don't know how detailed it would be. It seems to me if Flynn was very detailed about it, he would lose a lot of leverage with what he could get in a plea bargain. So I don't know how that would work. That needs to be played out. There might be problems. I still say that now, after a year, after what we've seen here with the Manafort and a couple other small players and with Flynn, I'm still not sure that we see anything like actual collusion, which in itself is not a crime.
Let me just step in. Paul Manafort was the campaign chairman at one point, and Michael Flynn was national security advisor. Those aren't small players. Those are major players. And if you go back just to the legal aspect real quick, like I said, the judge is not party to the plea bargain. The judge does not have to accept the plea bargain. The judge knows that at this point, Michael Flynn has pled guilty, and he can be sentenced up to 5 years against the recommendation of the attorney's office.
All right, we have to take a quick break, but we are going to talk about this some more, and also the tax reform package still before the Senate. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a moment. We are talking about the week in Washington, and joining us for more is Rod Thompson, president of the Sarasota Republican Club, and Kevin Griffith, the vice chair of the Sarasota Democratic Party. And there's a lot we want to get to, but let's wrap up our discussion about the Flynn case, because this is a pretty big day in the course of this investigation. And Rod, let me start with you, and I know you want to talk about the pressure that General Flynn was on, but for so many months now, the president has been saying there were no discussions with the Russians. He knows nothing about him, about those discussions. Now it appears that the president's top closest advisor on national security in the White House for the first month and during the campaign was talking to the Russians well before he took office.
Apparently is the correct word there, because we still don't know. These are reports out there. So that's certainly possible. That he was. It's possible Trump didn't know. It's possible Trump directed him to. I don't remember Trump's wording about whether he ever knew about conversations or knew about collusion or not. It doesn't really matter, because he wouldn't be careful with his wording anyway. But one of my great concerns, and I think you know this, with the special counsel law, going back to Ken Starr, same thing. Ken Starr went on fishing expeditions too, is that the special counsel can go indefinitely. They have indefinite resources, and when they're going after a person that doesn't, say, have Trump's wealth personally, they push them to the point of bankruptcy. Just today, Flynn, if I was found out that Flynn was at the point of having to sell his house to keep paying for his legal bills, this strikes me as a deeply unfair situation for Americans to be under. I realize we want to get to the truth, but there has to be better ways than the special counsel law.
Well, it does bring the irony up again with General Flynn leading the chant at the convention, "Lock her up." It kind of raises the question of, be careful what you're saying about others, lest you be in a situation like that a little bit later. But I also want to ask you both about this other story that came out regarding Russia this week, that over the summer, President Trump repeatedly urged Senate Republicans, including the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, to end the investigation and let it go.
Well, I mean, I think that's a problem, because if it's not President Trump sticking the finger on the scale of the investigation, then it's coming very, very close. And that's the problem with President Trump on many, many issues.
Rod?
It wouldn't surprise me if he would do that. He would see that as perfectly appropriate, probably.
Do you?
Not necessarily. Not ideally, no. However, we are in such an incredibly non-ideal situation in Washington, it wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the tax bill. As we speak, Senate Republicans are still trying to get this onto the Senate floor. I mean, there have been more twists and turns in this. And Rod, the polling shows that this bill is incredibly unpopular with Americans, and that you know, all reports from the Congressional Budget Office and so forth shows it's going to add over $1 trillion to the national debt, and that many Americans who make below a certain amount of money will, in the end, wind up paying more money in their taxes in years to come.
Okay, so the last part I don't think is accurate. The first two parts I think are not totally relevant. That it will add $1 trillion in debt. I read this story today about the conservative Democrats who are concerned about the $1 trillion debt, and I about fell out of my chair laughing, because these are the same people that voted for Obamacare, for the stimulus, for everything else that added $10 trillion of debt under Obama. But now suddenly, when Republicans are talking about tax reform and a tax package that could give breaks across the board and make American companies competitive again, suddenly they discovered there's a debt to be concerned about.
Conversely to that, though, there are a lot of Republicans, including Vern Buchanan, who has led the charge to balance the budget for many, many years, and now you are voting for a bill that would possibly add $1 trillion to the debt.
Well, I think the problem there, though, Vern has been a consistent deficit hawk, correct. The problem is that the way the CBO is required to score the budget proposals, tax proposals such as this, it means that they can't really take that dynamic approach that shows how much it could goose the economy and help revenues in that respect.
Kevin, can all Democrats do at this point is sit and basically bang the table? I really don't hear a cohesive message coming out of congressional Democrats in the House or Senate in terms of making the case against this bill.
Here's the problem. This bill is pretty much par for the course for the Republicans. If you take a step back and you look at George Bush back in 2000, they passed a tax cut. Then we have the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which add trillions of dollars to the debt. President Obama gets elected, comes in, has 8 years. Finally, the economy's back on track, had, I believe, 80+ months of positive growth. And now we're back to the Republicans, who always claim to run on fiscal discipline, yet they're adding $1 trillion to the debt. And just so the people at home know, this is what I've, from reading about the tax plan. The argument that the Republicans are putting forward is this. They are saying that they believe the tax cuts will stimulate the growth in the economy, and that extra growth in the economy will make up for the tax cuts. Here's the problem. The congressional, not the CBO, but one of the congressional committees came out today and said, even if that happens, what they're claiming happens, we still add $1 trillion to the deficit. So even if what the Republicans believe will happen happens, we still add to the debt.
Over what period of time is this $1 trillion deficit? It's not in 1 year, right?
10.
So it's over 10 years. That's 100 billion years. It's interesting to me that we put it over 10 because you really maximize the number. Under Obama, we had more than $1 trillion debt 2 different individual years.
Yes,
I'm sorry, it really rings empty with the Democrats here.
But what Obama was forced to do was pay back for George Bush's unpaid wars and the tax cut that was given in 2000
and
and
2001.
$900
$900 billion stimulus package.
A stimulus package which put people to work in infrastructure jobs around the country. If you go back and look at the research, infrastructure pays itself $7 to 1.
In the time we have left in this segment, I want to ask both you again, there is already talk that assuming this bill passes into law, there may be looks at cutting Medicare and other entitlement programs. How would that play, Rod?
All of that is always bad politics. Here's how it will play, I guarantee you. Every time the Republicans, the party of responsibility, talks about entitlement reform, talks about doing something that's sustainable going forward, the Democrats run ads about pushing grandma off a bridge and making her eat dog food, and that will happen again. That's exactly how that will play politically.
And I want to give you the final word here.
This is what I've read about this bill. Both businesses and individuals get tax cuts in the beginning. As we get out to 2027, the middle class and the individuals, their taxes go up. The businesses their cuts stay.
All right,
That's not fair.
We're going to have to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more in a moment. We're going to take a break from talking about what's happening in Washington and talk about what's happening here in the Sarasota area on the Suncoast with the special election to fill Alex Miller's House seat in District 72. The Democratic primary is next Tuesday, and then after that we're off on the general election. And first, let me ask the both of you how this is shaping up, because these special elections around Florida have been used almost as reading tea leaves in terms of how the environment is affecting local races. Rod, what are you looking at?
Yeah, well, I think political people love to do that. I'm not sure how much we can read from each one of these individually because they're all so different. I think in this particular race, the district is +4 to 5 Republicans, so that's pretty close. It's a special election, which generally the Republican turnout is a little bit higher percentage than the Democrat. However, it's a special election with the Trump factor involved, so we don't know, what that could be. And you have a Democrat primary, so you might have extra Democrat, excitement about it. I think it could be a very, very close race, actually. And I feel like that the Republicans cannot take this seat for granted at all, and we'd be foolish to.
And I know there's a limitation since you are the party vice chair in terms of talking about the two candidates, but this has been a hotly contested Democratic primary. It
has, but I couldn't be prouder of both the women running because, first of all, the contention's been on policy, and that's really what the voters want. There's 40,000 plus registered Democrats in District 72. I encourage all of them to come out on Tuesday and vote. But again, whichever Democratic nominee comes out after Tuesday, they're going to be very strong. We're going to be united, and we're going to finally have Democratic representation.
But it hasn't been totally about policy. The biggest single issue that has come up during this primary campaign is the fact that last week, Margaret Good, who has raised an impressive amount of money, turned down the debate on this broadcast against her opponent, Ruta Giuliani. And after that happened, James Buchanan, who is the Republican running, said that he will not take part in forums in the general election. I think that's pathetic.
Well, again, let me just so the audience knows, my role, I'm the vice chairman of the Sarasota County Democratic Party. I'm very sensitive in the primary to both candidates and the electorate, knowing that we are running a very fair election. And so that's the #1 important to me. So I'm not going to be able to comment on what campaigns decide to do and not decide to do.
Right, but I did
talk to me on Wednesday, and we have a nominee. Then I'll come back and I'll make those comments.
I did ask Margaret Good, how do you make the case to James Buchanan that you need to debate me if she wins the primary? If he could say, well, you didn't debate your primary.
Well, one thing I can say is throughout this campaign, this Democratic primary, I've personally been at 3 events where I introduced both candidates to the forum of people there. Some were as small as 20 or 25, some were as big as 100 or 150.
That's not the same as a stage like this.
I understand.
And Rod, let me ask you this. How can James Buchanan say, I will not participate in any sort of debate?
So I think what you see here is a not uncommon sort of tactic that's taken, and that's, with Margaret Good doing it, with James doing it, that the candidate that has a lot more resources in a race feels there's more risk in a debate. I'm not saying that I agree with that. I like full policy debate. I like principled debate. But as a campaign tactic, you see that more and more common out there.
Okay, we have to take a break, and we'll be back in a moment. And our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And let's go back to our top story of the day, because it really is, whatever side you're on, it's a momentous day in the investigation into this Russia situation. The specter of the former national security advisor pleading guilty to a felony with everything that may come from that. Rod, what is your biggest concern?
Well, my biggest concern is that there will actually have been a conspiracy within the Trump campaign, which would be really, really bad. I don't actually think that's the case, but that would be my biggest concern. I think, though, that there's a lot of other really good things going on in the country that we just can't focus on. Part of it is the media. Part of it is Trump, always redirecting to the wrong things, I feel like. But the economy is going really well. Deregulation is helping a lot. You have the GDP is above expectations. Our unemployment is at the lowest that it's been in 17 years. There's so much good that is actually going on, but my gosh, all we get is bad Trump all the time, and we don't get to see good Trump because it's a mixed bag.
Well, put that into perspective, Kevin, because I do have friends who say, look, my 401k is doing pretty darn good these days, and all you are talking about is Russia, Russia, Russia.
Well, Rod and Alan, you just made the point for why we don't need tax cuts. If everything's going so well right now, why do the rich in America need more? Why do we need those tax cuts if things are growing so well now? And I just want to make a point for the people at home. Part of this includes the estate tax, which means if you have over $11.5 million to pass on.
I figured 2 guests and 4 blocks of conversation would be enough, and it was not. But thank you both. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of you had to say about last night's show on felons in schools. A few weeks ago, a teenager was arrested for allegedly having a gun on a school bus. That same student has a previous felony conviction. A different student is being charged with a felony after threatening a post on social media. We went to Facebook to ask you if you thought that the schools should make students and parents aware when students are convicted felons. And Laura says the students need to be protected. They should be told, they need to be made aware so they can be careful around the school. Tamara says, are we told when there are felons walking around us at our jobs? No, I really don't think it's anyone's business, mainly because people are so quick to judge someone based off of what could have been a mistake, one-time mistake. And Lori says we need to know if someone coming in contact with our kids have been convicted of violent crimes or sexual assault, even if it's a classmate. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation on tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/mysuncoast.com.abc7. And FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And for the latest on the parade and the local breaking news, don't forget to download our updated version of our app. If you have a current app and it doesn't work, that's because it is expired. Just go to the App Store and re-download it by searching for WWSB or My Suncoast. We want to thank both our guests for being here tonight. Rod Thompson is the president of the Sarasota Republican Club, and Kevin Griffith is the vice chair of the Sarasota Democratic Party.